Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Bill Flanagan and I'm the President and Vice Chancellor here at the University of Alberta. And I'm really delighted to welcome all of you today joining on our live stream town hall. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. First, I just want to acknowledge how hard everyone is working. I know during a time of COVID, it's a struggle really for all of us. Our faculty, staff, and students have really done extraordinary work. And I just want to thank all members of the university community for pulling together at this challenging time. And of course, it's a challenging time not only because of COVID, but of course, because of the financial pressures facing the university. And that's a very important topic that we'll be talking about today, the plans that we've sketched for the University of Alberta for tomorrow, to try to address some of these financial challenges, achieve financial sustainability for the university, and really think boldly and creatively about what the University of Alberta for tomorrow can look like. Today, we're going to be focusing on academic restructuring. And on October 5th, we will be holding a second town hall that will focus on the administrative restructuring, the Sept initiative. And today, I'd like to begin with just a few opening remarks, and then I will turn the platform over to Provost Steve Dew, who will provide an overview of the work of the Academic Restructuring Working Group to date, and also the three scenarios that have been distributed in the interim report of the working group. And then in order to get questions from all of you, and I'm pleased to say we have well over 500 people viewing online today, and with such numbers, it's difficult to engage as we would like. And of course, I really wish that we were able to do this in person, but we're going to be using Thought Exchange, and this is a useful tool to identify the top questions of all of you viewing today. And so we'll be asking you to identify what your top questions are, and then Steve and I will have an opportunity to address some of these top questions. But first, before we begin, I want to begin by acknowledging that the University of Alberta resides on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. And that acknowledgement is particularly important today because today is, of course, Orange Shirt Day, inspired by the story of Phyllis Jack Webstead, who had her new orange shirt taken from her on her first day of school. And we wear our orange shirts every September 30th in honor and memory of this. And Orange Shirt Day is a time to honor the children and the families who were and continue to be impacted by the legacy of the Indian residential school system. And as active partners in reconciliation, the University of Alberta has a responsibility to acknowledge, understand, and educate. And the intergenerational and historical trauma caused by residential schools still impacts our students, peers, friends, and families. And at the University of Alberta, we strive to be a place where equity and inclusivity in thought and action thrive. And today I'm not only proudly wearing my orange shirt, but I just wanted to acknowledge a special gift from my dear friend and mentor, David Sharp, someone I worked very closely with in my previous role as Dean at Queen's University. David is a proud Mohawk from the Tyendinaga community close to Kingston. This is a little orange shirt that was handmade by a member of his community with some beautiful beadwork. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you, David, for that very precious gift. And so I'd like to begin just talking a little bit about the University of Alberta for tomorrow. And I know that in previous town halls, I've talked a little bit about the vision for the University of Alberta tomorrow, and also the urgency that is facing the university and the need to restructure in order to realize savings so that we can invest the maximum amount of our resources in our academic and our academic mission, teaching and research. But today I want to talk about what I've heard so far and some of the feedback that we've received so far. And I think some very important feedback. And first I want to thank Ricardo Acuna and Elizabeth Johansson, presidents of ASHWA and NASA, who gave a very powerful presentation to the board, Human Resources and Compensation Committee yesterday. And I also want to acknowledge the important piece by our colleague, David Kahan, published in today's Edmonton Journal, calling for meaningful consultation. And likewise, I want to just also thank the members of GFC. We had a GFC meeting earlier this week, a first step in a process of consultation. And we also heard loud and clear about the community's demands around consultation. And first, with respect to consultation, I'm just reflecting on some of David's insights in the Edmonton Journal piece today. And I had 4 takeaways. The first, access to data and information is essential for meaningful consultation. Clarity about the consultation process, collective deliberation, and sufficient time in order to engage. And likewise, I just wanted to comment that in terms of the consultation and clarity about our consultation process, this is the first of 5 town halls that we will be hosting over the next several weeks, focusing on both academic restructuring and the Sept initiative. We'll also be holding a town hall on October 20th for our alumni. Steve and I are going to be meeting with each of the faculties in roundtables scheduled over the next 4 weeks. And those roundtables will be an opportunity for collective deliberation. That is, we want to hear from all of our community members. We won't be using thought exchange in those. Once we have a smaller group, it's easier, of course, to have individual participation. And we certainly recognize the importance of that collective deliberation. And likewise, there's going to, a number of our deans are leading consultations. There's numerous committees and other stakeholder groups. I've also committed to meet regularly with the presidents of ASHO and NASA going forward as part of the consultation process. So I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of the calls for consultation and this consultation be meaningful. And likewise, we welcome all submissions on our website and also submissions about the nature of the consultation. And we know how important this is to the university community. And indeed, without a meaningful process of consultation, what we're proposing to achieve simply won't be possible. And so we do want to hear from all of you. Your feedback and your input are absolutely essential. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who's going to do a quick review of the work of the Academic Restructuring Working Group today. And then we're going to open it up for questions.
I wanted to start off with a thank you, not only to the folks on the working group who put a lot of effort into some of the thoughts and scenarios that we'll be discussing today, but also the whole community who is engaged in many different fora in providing input and advice into the process. So let me jump in here. So academic restructuring at its core has to support our vision. That's our vision as articulated in For the Public Good and also in University of Alberta for Tomorrow. And there, of course, are important financial drivers in why we're undertaking the restructuring in the way that we are in the time frame we are. And so resources is a key component of that motivation. And our ability to make sure that as much as possible of our resources are going directly to support the frontline activities of our mission. But there are also other benefits, other outcomes that we would like to see that are not financial in nature, that we cannot let our financial pressures be the sole driver in what does the outcome of this process look like. And I've listed a number of them here. You've heard me talk about them in the past, as well as Bill. It's really about us being a much more nimble, more dynamic, a more collaborative, a more interdisciplinary organization, one that is able to think a little bit more clearly about how we serve our students and our community, and also reflects the importance that this institution has around some key values, including equity, diversity, and inclusivity. The working group already referenced, you would have heard us talking at town halls in the late spring, early summer about the approach that it's taking of coming through in a number of phases. The first phase in the June-July timeframe being around stage setting. You'll recall we developed a set of principles and objectives which we brought through GSC and board and heard a lot about what are some of the really important values, the high level things that we need to be keeping very close in mind as we do this work. Second phase is around options, and that's where we are today. We have the report issued last week, a number of options that have been put forward with the idea that they're going to be a straw dog for us to kick around and share some more concrete thoughts about what works, what doesn't work. So that's a key objective of this round of consultation. The third phase being around the proposal that ultimately we hope to bring in the November timeframe with the idea that in December we can start to engage our our governance bodies in an approval. So the committee's done a lot of work. We've done many meetings, considered lots of data, including looking carefully at some of the experiences from around the world as others have wrestled with similar sorts of challenges. And this is an opportunity now to do a bit of a check-in to see if we're on track. This is a diagram you might have seen before, just updating where we are in the timeline, reflecting the phases that I just described. The interim report, as mentioned, was circulated last week. If you haven't seen it, just go to the university's homepage, and you should be able to find a link towards the bottom directly onto that document, as well as it can be accessed through the U of A-for-Tomorrow homepage, also reachable from our institutional homepage. The report tries to capture a lot of the thinking that the group has done, as it's made a journey that has taken us in different directions, not necessarily all of the ones we would have predicted from the outset, but as we've dug deeper into this and heard more from different people, it's clear that we do need to have a very sophisticated approach to how we restructure this institution. The report presents 3 high-level scenarios, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly. It also has some underlying recommendations that are reflected in the scenarios, one of which is that we take a consolidation approach, so take our existing units and move them around in bigger chunks, rather than start with a blank piece of page and design everything from scratch. It very much recognizes that our current faculties and departments have a dual role. One is on, of course, delivering our academic programs, the teaching, the research that we have as our core central mission. But those units also do a lot of administration. Half of the administration of the institution is delivered by faculties and departments. And keeping in mind the separation, the potential to separate those two, because how we respond in a restructuring process might be quite different on the administrative side and the academic side. And you'll see that in some of the models, particularly that involve a division. We're also trying to reduce the leadership burden by reducing the number of positions such as associate chair or associate dean or chair, and allow more of our professors to be involved in their first love that got them into this field, which is their teaching and research. As well, one of the recommendations is about 3 of our faculties, that's Campus Saint-Jean, Augustana, and Native Studies, all of which we recognize have a very specific and unique mission that reflects their different communities that they address, and the importance of the autonomy that they have to pursue that mission and not be lost in a larger unit that perhaps does not have that as its front core objective. You will see that we are focusing at this point on faculties and faculty structure. That isn't to say departments aren't important. It's we need to get the big buckets figured out first before we dig down into the more detailed levels of the departments. Want to acknowledge at this point there are many details that we have not yet worked out. We wanted to come to this body as early as possible and as early in the formation of these thoughts as possible to get feedback, rather than be going down what might ultimately be a blind alley from the perspective of our community. In terms of the scenarios, scenario A reflects a path that we thought would be the most logical at the outset, which is we start with our smallest units and bring them together into larger units, larger faculties, seeking both the economies of scale in administration, as well as academic synergies that could result from having a broader scope of disciplines all under a single faculty, a single direction of leadership. Scenario A reflects that in that as we looked at our 18 faculties, we could certainly see if we brought nursing, rehabilitation medicine, public health, pharmacy, pharmaceutical sciences, kinesiology all together in a single integrated health sciences faculty, with schools that reflect those disciplines and focus on the delivery of those programs, but the faculty itself providing a more coherent, integrated vision and direction. We can see some good value from that as a direction. Those are areas with some common elements that will find opportunities for academic synergies in programming, particularly the opportunity for an undergraduate health sciences degree, perhaps, or health sciences programming that individually none of those faculties could offer, but collectively would be quite realistic. Opportunities for interprofessional education. So quite a few academic synergies that come out of that grouping. And it's a group that would be familiar across the U15 as an allied health sciences faculty. The challenge with taking that model further is the 3 small community units that I mentioned. Harder to find ways to merge them into a bigger faculty without losing their independent and autonomous need to deliver their vision. And then skipping past them, as we got combinations like law and business and education, we realized that the opportunities for academic synergy were not as strong, and that would be motivated solely by the administrative economies of scale and not the academic ones. So that limited our ability to go down this path, and you see scenario A only stops at the health sciences for that reason. So if scenario A was starting small and building up, scenario B is more starting big and seeing what can be done there. Here, what we have are most of the faculties landing in 3 large groupings, which we're calling currently divisions, with the idea that we would be looking to amalgamate a lot of the administration. As much as possible of the administration would flow up to the divisional level. We get good economies of scale. We would leave the faculties in name to focus on the delivery of the academic side and the programs that they currently support. But the nature of what is done at a faculty would have to change in this model, that it would be strictly focused on the academic piece with all of the administrative components and some of the academic components, which we'll talk about later, moving up into the divisional level to give us those economies. Native Studies, Augustana, CSJ remaining as autonomous units, not part of these large divisions. The divisions themselves being lined up around our 3 funding agencies, not just simply because that allows us with opportunities around research and strategizing towards those agencies, but also just a natural affiliation of those 3 groupings in a lot of the vernacular and affiliations that we feel across campus. Scenario C is a bit of a blend between those 2 strategies. So it involves making the alignments at a faculty level, grouping subunits as schools as much as possible where those make sense. So that would be arts and science. Again, another common U15 faculty that we'll see at other institutions. That health sciences faculty I already talked about, as well as an applied science faculty, which would pull in engineering and AILS as disciplines that do have some potential in terms of standard approaches to methodology. And there are applied sciences faculties in North America and some opportunities for models there. That proposal, that scenario does not roll FOMD, medicine and dentistry, into one of the other units, just simply given its very large size already. But the other 6 units come together as a single division in order to provide the economies of scale at the administrative level, even recognizing we probably don't see the academic synergies between those 6 units, such as CSJ Augustana, Native Studies, Education, Business and Law. So a bit of a combination approach between the 2 other scenarios. So I'm hoping that we'll have a chance to dig a little bit more deeply into questions people might have about the specific scenarios, but a number of questions have come up so far, and I'd like to start by just addressing some of those. I've got 5 listed here. First, is everything already decided? Is this a fully baked idea, or are we actually here to hear from people? The second question is scenario costing. How did some of those numbers come out? What's the difference between operational and leadership savings? Third, what happens if we don't achieve everything that we want to financially through academic restructuring? Fourth, a little bit more dealing with the division and what is this new creature that we're talking about here. And then finally, again, relating to the division, if we create another level in the hierarchy, the academic hierarchy, how can that lead to reduced costs? So those are the ones that I'll dive into, and others that I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity to deal with in discussion. So is this fully baked? Are we here to sell you, or are we here to listen? And the answer is very much the latter. We recognize that this is new territory for us. It's frankly new territory for just about any institution in the world, given the magnitude and speed that we have to move. And we really do need to hear from everyone in order to be able to miss as little as possible. There are lots of details I've already mentioned we haven't worked out, and it will require a lot of expertise that we don't have at the committee level. We need to actually get closer to some of the practitioners in order to understand the viability of some of the approaches, and I'll give some examples shortly. And there's lots of ideas. We have no monopoly on that, and I'm hoping to hear if there's something completely novel that we haven't yet thought of. And really, it has to be a participation. We need buy-in at the end of the day in order to make this work, and recognize that only happens if people feel like they've had a chance to participate. On the cost savings side, where did those numbers come from? And acknowledge right up front, these are high-level estimates. Before we can do the detailed costing, we need to have a lot more of the details figured out, and we need that feedback from you in order to get to that place. The intention is that the numbers give us a sense of being able to compare different scenarios and understand the direction that they lead us in, but these are not to 2 decimal places accurate or precise numbers. You'll see separation between operations and leadership savings. The operations savings come from economies of scale of delivering the support functions, the administration, by bringing them into larger, more specialized units, which is possible only if we pull them into bigger, higher level units. The estimates that are given come from modeling of our own uniform data. And you would have seen some graphs shared in the spring of what that data looks like. I'll add that data does not include FOMD. FOMD does not scale within the model the way that the rest of the faculties do. And so the estimates that involve medicine and dentistry do not anticipate economies of scale, not because we don't anticipate they would occur, but simply that the model didn't include that. So the projected savings would be more significant if we had a model that included those. These are what I would call direct savings, meaning that they would result in positions being eliminated, whether they're through attrition or layoffs. And so we would be able to directly attribute the action to a savings in dollars. Also acknowledge that they overlap with Sept. So both Sept and Academic Restructuring are seeking to reduce our costs of delivering the support functions, the administration, but they're taking different strategies. One's looking at economies of scale, the other's going right to the work itself and redesigning the work and workflows. So you have to be careful that we can't count the same dollar too many times here. The leadership savings are a little different. They are stemming from us having fewer professors being pulled out of teaching and research and put into leadership roles. They come from just simply counting how many heads are involved in a particular scenario. Some assumptions have to be made in order to do that. And as we get more information, we can refine those estimates more fully. Those savings are indirect. And by that, I mean, we, of course, if we eliminate let's say an associate chair role, we do not lay that person off. They return to the professoriate, return to their teaching and research activities. And the savings come from the fact that we are able to deliver the same teaching and research function with fewer professors. And so the savings is in the reduction in number of professors, while still sustaining the amount of academic work that we're doing. What happens if we don't achieve what we intend through academic restructuring? We know we have a financial challenge. We have $216 million expected less in our grant funding by 2023. That gets offset by some anticipated increases in tuition and enrollment, which leaves us a hole of about $127 million in just 2 years' time, 2.5 years' time. The academic restructuring, so that's a given. That doesn't really, no matter what we do, that's going to happen. Academic restructuring and Sept are intended to allow us to restructure this organization so that we do less work. And so with those reduced resources, we're still able to deliver the same high-level output of research, same solid learning environment and experiences, and the same student supports. So that's the goal of those two initiatives. If we are unsuccessful in meeting that goal, then it will impact directly on our mission by not preserving those 3 critical activities. And that's not something that we're prepared to accept. There is overlap, as I already mentioned, between the savings projected between the two approaches, because they're trying to tackle the same issue. But there's also synergies. So the more we do with academic restructuring, the easier it will be for us to achieve the Sept initiative. And I'm not just talking about making the dollar objective smaller. I'm talking about the different academic structure simplifies the task of consolidating the administrative functions under Sept. A little bit more about what is a division. A division is, in this context, and we can debate the terminology another day, but in this context, a division is a grouping of those faculties intended to, first and foremost, share administrative duties so that we can continue to keep the administration linked closely to the academic activities, but achieve those economies of scale. And allow the faculties and departments to continue to have that continuity, to have identity, even though their role alters as that administrative component comes out. Particularly in scenario B, we also expect to see some academic economies of scale, the ability to bring some academic functions up to the higher level and increase the collaboration, increase the interdisciplinarity, and reduce duplication in that way, but also to introduce some other important functions that we really not able to do uniformly, such as look at supporting EDI at the faculty or the division level in ways that we can't currently do, or support international activities, for example. So I'll give some examples of that a little bit later. Now, if you look at an org chart, you add another layer, how does that make us more efficient? How does that save us any money? And at first glance, that's not intuitive. It comes at the administrative level from those economies of scale I talked about. And we can also see economies of scale at the academic level in certain cases, where that academic function can be pulled away a bit from the programs that it has traditionally been linked closely to. And that would allow us to have fewer academic leaders, as I've explained, take away less out of our professoriate, and allow us to continue to deliver those functions with fewer professors. Not that I want us to have fewer professors, of course not, but that's the reality that given our financial situation, we're not going to be doing very much hiring for the next couple of years. And so to sustain our academic functions, the academic leaders can be repurposed. So I'll give an example that I hope makes this a little bit more clear. Here is our current configuration of academic leaders across our faculties. You can see they're broken up by different categories where we have standard leadership functions such as an associate dean research or an associate chair graduate. Those are put into a separate category. In some places, they're grouped into an other category. So you'll see across the FOMD line that there will be a number of associate deans other or associate chairs other, which reflects the fact that that faculty has a need to support disciplinary and professional needs that lead it to some very unique roles. Don't want to touch with those. Obviously, the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry is the right place to deliver those. But you can see if we look across a total at the bottom left of 321 people who are pulled out of, at least partly pulled out of their professorial roles in order to take on these leadership roles. Here's an example of what could be done potentially under a division model. You see the division at the top with an executive dean overseeing high-level strategy and those administrative functions, but also on here you can see some academic pieces that might get pulled up to that level, such as research, and pulling the research up to the division level where it has the greatest degree of scope and ability to support interdisciplinarity, and be supported by a really robust team of professional staff, rather than have it distributed across some 30 or so professors who are trying to do both transactional activities as well as strategic ones. This allows the academic leader to be setting strategy, setting policy, dealing with those really tricky precedent-setting issues, and having a really solid support team to amplify that impact out to a larger number of professors. Same we can do with the Associate Dean grad programs. That's a very, very complex administration process right now, designed, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago, and not to the scale that we currently deliver our graduate programs. International EDI, these are functions that some faculties have tried to embed right into their academic activities. I think that's a great idea, and we can extend that over the whole institution by putting these functions at the division level. The faculty level, we're focused strictly on academic elements, and so associate deans for programs, grad and undergrad, associate deans for students, discipline, student services like advising or curriculum-related work integrated learning. That really does need to be done at the faculty level. And at the department level, again, curriculum, so we need an associate chair program, but not the associate chair research or the associate chair grad. So that's a model. And if we follow this model, then we end up with this table where we can see, say in this example, same number of departments, haven't done any departmental consolidation. All of those special functions are still there. It's the common functions that we can roll up that we see the economies of scale. And in this model, we see 83 fewer leadership roles, 83 fewer professors pulled away from the classroom, pulled away from the research lab, and hopefully still be able to deliver as good or better support for those functions. That this is just an example of how the division model, even though it adds a layer, that layer allows us to be much more effective at providing that common shared leadership and strategy. So that's the key pieces I wanted to cover. This is now a chance for us to really turn it over and hear from you. What are your questions and concerns? What advice do you have? What other ideas do you have that we need to be paying attention to? And some guidance as we move forward, what to be really doing in order to fill in some of those gaps. Lots of opportunities. Bill's talked a lot about this, so I think I'll just skip over that and really try to move us towards getting questions and discussion. So Bill, I think back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Just before we begin the thought exchange, where we will be asking you for your top questions, and then Steve and I will have a chance to address some of these questions, I just wanted to share a few of my own thoughts about the scenarios and a bit of an evolution of my own thinking of the potential scenarios. And for me, the great challenge in this discussion has been, how do we recognizing that larger units will drive economies of scale that will help the university achieve financial sustainability. So we recognize the value of larger units, but we also recognize the importance of existing faculties, both as faculties, but also as academic homes for each of us and the identity that is associated with that faculty. And this has always been a tension in all of the discussions. How do we achieve the economies of scale that we're hoping to reach, but at the same time, how to retain the importance of existing faculties and the identity associated with those faculties. So with scenario A, fairly modest one, we just take existing faculties that seem to have most in common and group them in the Faculty of Health Sciences and leave the remaining faculties untouched. So scenario A has the, I think, advantage of really retaining most of the existing identities of existing faculties. But of course, we're not realizing as much of the economies of scale as we might hope to realize by just doing a smaller amalgamation. Scenario C was an attempt to go a little bit further, that is, explore groupings such as arts and science or applied science or health sciences, of course, where there might be some shared academic interests, where a larger grouping might make sense in order to achieve the economies of scale. But we would also retain some distinct faculties in the remaining divisions, trying to, again, address the importance that we attach to faculties and the academic identity associated with those faculties. With respect to scenario B, I have to tell you my first reaction to it was a bridge too far. It was too dramatic to move to a tri-council model for the university. But as we explored it further, particularly explored the idea of, well, why not allow all existing faculties to retain the status of faculty, being led by an academic dean, but group them in the tri-council where each would have a larger shared research interest. And of course, in these large groupings, we achieve the economies of scale. But in retaining the existing faculties, and in particular, the academic leadership resting with those faculties, we might retain what is most important about the faculty and the identity associated with the faculty. And likewise, as Steve has mentioned, Campus Saint-Jean, Augustana, Faculty of Native Studies, given their unique community-focused mission, we wouldn't group them into any of these three larger divisions. So that's a little bit of my own journey. And so I have to say it certainly evolved during discussions, and it will continue to evolve as we seek feedback from the whole university community. So with that in mind, I'd like to now turn to the thought exchange. Thought exchange, I just want to be clear, is not a substitute for constructive deliberation. It is, however, a really useful way for you to communicate your top questions to us, and it will very quickly sort what those top questions are. But I just want to be clear that I'm not proposing thought exchange as a substitute for collective deliberation. We must do that. We will do that, particularly with our faculty meetings and our ongoing committee meetings and all of the other ways in which we engage with the community. But thought exchange can be a useful tool to get the top thoughts and your top questions. So we'll turn it over to that now. And so this is how you can join the thought exchange. Very easy to share your thoughts and then to rank the thoughts of the others who have shared their thoughts. And very quickly, we'll have an idea of what the top questions are of all of those several hundred of you who are now viewing. So I'm just going to stop talking, and I'm going to allow everyone to participate in the thought exchange for about 5 to 6 minutes, and then we will return and address some of the questions. Thank you.
For those who are looking for the link, if you refresh your YouTube, you should be able to see a link at the bottom, and that will allow you to directly go to the thought exchange. Okay, I think we'll pull people back together. We've had 900 participants on the thought exchange, and you should be able to see just a bit of a breakdown of some of the data there. You can see that we're roughly half support staff, about a third academic staff, and the remainder students, alumni, and other. Let's jump to some of the top thoughts. Top thought number one is, how can you possibly reduce support staff with increased need for instructor support in an online U of A? Absolutely recognize the challenge that COVID is presenting to us and having us be in an online mode. And clearly we have to be very careful about that particular element of supporting our academic enterprise. So fully agree with the implied sense that no, that's one area that reducing our ability to support online work in particular would be something that we would have to put off until some life where COVID is a bit of a memory for us. But many of the other functions that we're looking at that don't directly relate to delivery of online, I'm afraid we don't have the ability to postpone those. Our financial pressures are dire and time driven. Government has set clear expectations that they have to happen starting in this fiscal year. And so with much of this, we will have to move forward, even recognizing the need for the online component to be supported well. Second question, Sept is drawing on uniform data that is not unit specific. So how does it approach? So its approach does not appreciate the specific work that is done on campus. So just want to be clear that uniform is one piece that's driving the Sept initiative, and we'll certainly spend a lot more time at next week's town hall talking specifically about Sept. But just to be clear, uniform is just one of a number of different pieces of information that is driving our restructuring. All of the uniform data and our existing internal record systems are being reconciled and pulled into a common picture of where is what work being done. And if we were to reorganize it, restructure it, what pieces do we need to pull from? So I'm going to push a larger discussion of this till next week when we're really focused on Sept, but recognize the need for us to really have a fully a vibrant picture of this system that we're trying to understand and rebuild using a multiplicity of data sources. What are the impacts on staffs, layoffs, reassignment, et cetera, in each of the three models? Yeah, this is a critical one, and recognize the challenge that this model will bring in terms of, frankly, loss to all of us in terms of some of our relationships, some of our people, some of our traditional ways of doing systems on campus. And so how we approach particularly the staff is one that's going to have to be done carefully. I'm going to leave some of that discussion to Sept, because that's really going to be much more in its wheelhouse. But we have lots of people who've given a lot to this institution. We need to be respectful of those contributions, and to the greatest extent possible, find ways for our existing people to migrate into potentially new roles in the organization. I'll leave the details on that to next week. Will there be additional staff layoffs as a result of the proposed restructuring? The magnitude of the reductions in our staff, whether those layoffs, attrition, or whatever, is really set by the financial challenges in front of us. And that's there regardless of our restructuring approach. It is set by the external environment that we're in. And so these processes are not about how many people we're going to have to lay off or what roles become redundant. It's more about how do we find ways to, given the people that we have, restructure the work so that they're not getting just simply more work piled on them with fewer people to cover the same amount of tasks. We have to reduce the number of tasks. We have to find ways to set our people up to be very successful at dealing with those tasks and be productive in ways that we haven't been able to in the past, just simply because of our balkanized structure of how we've organically grown into dozens of different ways to do the same function. But again, a lot of this is Sept related. Can we consider the student experience? Which one of these scenarios will ensure they're most supported most efficiently? A lot of the support student supports will spill into the Sept conversation. So this is one of those ones we're going to have conversations about in different arenas. But at the faculty level, where most of the student support components that are currently done by faculties. The objective is to reorganize them at the faculty level, as already talked about a bit in some of the scenario, the example I gave numerically. But if we reorganize how we oversee, let's say, the grad student piece, that's going to have to really engage our stakeholders, the students themselves, as well as our current team in devising what that looks like, so that it does not negatively impact, and in fact, as much as possible, possibly positively impacts our student experience. I see a complete elimination of academic support administration at the department level. It is true that we would want to move as much of the administrative components as possible out of departments to higher levels, but that would not be down to zero. There are many administrative roles which are directly tied to, let's say, scheduling classes or making sure that exams are set, that curricula gets put into the right review processes, that faculty hiring continues and evaluation continues. Those admin roles stay at the department level because that's where the work is, and I don't think that they get elevated. But HR, finance, IT, communications, that likely does get significantly pulled out, with service partners that are engaging the clients, if you will, in the new model. Again, a little bit more of a set question than an academic restructuring, but understand how it ties in given the impacts at the department level. Notion of academic versus executive deans seems rather unnecessary, and the mechanism for deans to retain their jobs. Believe me, we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we have fewer faculties, and scenario A still goes down that path. So too does scenario C, I guess. And that would reduce the number of deans we have. The challenge we have, and Bill talked a bit about this at the outset, and Bill, you might have more to say about it, is just how much of the identity of the academy sits with the faculties, and the relationships they have with their communities, the association there is between faculties and the programs. And so we did look at a number of different models, but what we heard fairly strongly was that identity and relationship to those faculties was a really critical thing that we should try and preserve if at all possible. So that's why we see that as a feature of scenario B, at least. Bill, did you want to say more on that?
Yeah, just to reinforce that point, as I indicated earlier, that really was a major issue we've been wrestling with, is how do we achieve the larger units that drive the savings, but at the same time retain the identities that are closely associated with existing faculties, and also the academic home for all of us within an existing faculty. And so this, as you can see, we came up with various proposals to try to balance that in the 3 different scenarios. But as Steve has mentioned, we did hear very clearly in the consultations to date of the importance of the existing faculty and the identity and the academic mission within that existing faculty. And so that's what scenario B, of course, is trying to preserve as much as possible. Likewise, scenario A is attempting to preserve by leaving most faculties untouched. So that is the challenge of academic restructuring that we've been wrestling with. And of course, the community feedback on this is going to be absolutely fundamental to determining how we will proceed.
Bill, we're almost out of time. Do you want to take a stab at the next one? And then that's probably all the time we have for today, but this is not the last opportunity for us to dig into these questions.
Yes, the unions must be involved in the core working groups. And again, I really appreciated an opportunity to meet with the presidents of both ASHWA and NASA yesterday, and I will continue to be meeting with them throughout the academic and administrative restructuring process. And I definitely recognize the importance that the union representatives have in representing their membership, in particular NASA, which is being heavily affected by Sept, and of course the ongoing job reductions that the university is facing right now. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge the impact on the university community of these layoffs, and in particular, the impact on the individuals affected. We can't lose sight of that. These are all people who have dedicated their working lives to the well-being of the university and have made huge contributions. It's a very challenging time as we undergo this restructuring. So again, the important role of the unions and their representatives throughout this process is something that I am personally very committed to. Now, I think this does wrap up our time, but I just wanted to once again thank all of you for participating today. We've gotten a lot of feedback with the Thought Exchange. We will continue to dig into that. That's again another advantage of Thought Exchange, is it develops a whole record that we can continue to work through. We're going to be leaving the Thought Exchange open for, I believe, yes, until the end of tomorrow. And so you can continue to add your thoughts or rate the thoughts of others. We will engage with the feedback that we've received on Thought Exchange through our blog posts and our posting on the UAT for University of Alberta for tomorrow. And likewise, as we continue with our town halls, the Thought Exchange will be informing what we do in terms of ongoing exchange with the university community. And likewise, this is really, as I mentioned earlier, really only the start of a much deeper process of consultation throughout the university community. I look forward to that. I look forward to an opportunity to engage with more of you as we work our way through this academic and administrative restructuring. And once again, thank you so much for your participation today.